Hi Taurus, welcome to your March reading. I have a bunch of notes, but we're doing intuitive first. There are some big changes, big truths that are leading to some big changes. It's very overwhelming. In some ways, in March, you have to move really slow, and in other ways, you have to move really, really fast and without thinking. So in the areas where you have to move really slow are the relationship areas, because right now anything can congeal and solidify. So because emotionally anything can solidify, things can get serious with anybody. You just want to, in terms of relationships, be more like wait and come to you. In terms of money, you want to be proactive, you want to follow your instincts, and you want to take risks. So you'll be operating in two different headspaces in March, which is not easy. Okay, we know that bulls like to pick a direction and run. Now, there's another area of life where you're going to implement a third way of being, and that's with your health. With your health, right now is about not playing the blame game. With your health, it's about focusing on whatever issue is at hand and working on it without getting into an ego struggle and without being that really harsh internal parent that we can be. So here, to me, this looks like, a harsh mother, someone who says to you, I told you not to do that. I knew this would happen. How could you have done that? And as we get older, as Freud says, we become that internalized parent for ourselves. We become that parent, so it internalizes, and now that voice sits in our head. So when it comes to health, there's work to be done and there's rest to be had. But as you can see, these three modes are very different. And the thing they have in common is that they all require that you give yourself an enormous amount of grace. That's not something that is easy for you, and it's certainly not something that you allow when you're in an ambitious phase. And this is an ambitious phase, okay? Because in some ways, to get ahead right now is really easy. You have very good luck when it comes to meeting people, when it comes to being influential to influential people. Influential people really like you. Famous people really like you. You can make lots of good connections. So in one way, you're feeling like so good. You're feeling stable. You're feeling accepted, perhaps more than you ever have. Right? You're feeling like, yeah, like I could do this. I could be successful. And right now you are setting yourself up for great success. So of course, follow your instincts. Be as fast as you want to be, faster than you want to be. Actually, when it comes to money, be faster. Be a little more foolish than you usually are. Okay, that's going to bring you huge results because your money, luck, and energy is so good right now. The direction is already set. There it is. And that well-oiled machine that we talk about shows up. So in terms of finances, you are hitting your stride. Now, the only way that gets complicated, or you don't feel as good as you should about the financial progress you'll be making, is that you have these other areas of your life that can gnaw at you a little bit, okay? And they can, they can bring up that which you are not necessarily fulfilled by. They can bring up the parts of you that you are disappointed in yourself. But disappointed in yourself in this Four of Cups is like, I should have done that. Why didn't I listen? Why didn't I listen to myself? It requires a lot of overthinking and a lot of blame. I did this to myself. If I would have just X, then Z. So I try to keep it somewhat to a minimum, but at times I feel that it is very necessary to bring a more philosophical point of view, a religious point of view, if you will, to certain settings. Now, when we talk about health, and you talk about your health status, and you talk about interpersonal relationships, in both of these areas, I find that we have a guilt that can often also happen with death. So, from my personal experience, I will explain it to you through that. I have been thinking for weeks now that if there was a way that I could have saved my brother, if I would have done this, if I would have done this, if I would have said this, if I could have, and it makes you feel like somehow like the responsibility was strictly in your hands. And it has taken people telling me over and over again for almost 2 months now that God does what God does when it's supposed to happen. God's timing is perfect. There is nothing you can do to change what God has decreed for someone. Now, we know that the only thing that can change certain things is prayer. Prayer can change your fate. However, does that mean that prayer changes the lessons you need to learn? No. Because those lessons are your grace. Those lessons are sent to you as a mercy. Those lessons are there to make you who you will become. So I want you to think, if you're going through something right now, I want you to seriously think about the things that you have gone through in your life and honestly assess how much you gained in learning, in experience, in fortitude when you didn't get what you wanted. How much character did you build? How much real world experience did you gain? And when in the future that knowledge, that learning base, when that helped you out, what much deeper, much worse tragedy did those lessons keep you from? Because right now, you're in the same position. You are being asked to trust that the difficulties that are being put in front of you, whether they are emotional or health-wise, are difficulties that sole purpose is to break or crack some part of you that is not strong enough, and to rebuild that part of you so you can withstand the next round of events and blessings. So what I mean to say is that every situation that you kick yourself about, that you think, if I wouldn't have done this, this wouldn't have happened to me. If I had been more like this wouldn't have happened to me. What you're actually saying is, I don't want that knowledge. I don't want that experience. I don't want that lived experience. I don't want to learn. Because those are the only things being put in your path, events that make you learn. So if you were to flip this in your head and not make it about ego and not make it about blame, and actually, just like you can celebrate your financial life, if you can celebrate the drawbacks in your emotional life and in your health and see them as a door, perhaps a very difficult door, 0 degrees Aquarius, Pluto, perhaps a very difficult door to walk through, but a door that, to me at least, feels emotionally cleansing. Because what happens after your mom is done blaming you? What happens after your dad is done being completely obtuse and blaming you not just for whatever's happened to you, but for like the world at large? What happens after that? After a while, they calm down, they leave it alone, they forget about it, and they love you again and they move on. Not the healthiest thing, pretty fucking toxic, but a lot of us know what that life is like. And a lot of us do the same thing with our internalized parent. We let our internalized parent kick our ass for a while, and then we forget about it and move on. This is not learning. Learning is changed behavior. This is how you stay stuck. And perhaps this is the reason why in certain aspects of your life this is happening, because in those aspects you are stuck. Doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of pain. Doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of kicking the shit out of you. Doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of emotional turbulence. It just means that at the end of the day, nothing is fixed. Nothing is getting solved. Nothing is changing. Nothing is evolving. It's just you getting beat up for no reason. Which is another hallmark of a lot of people's childhoods, right? So here we are deep in this glut of things that need to come out of us before we can cleanly walk through the 0-degree Pluto door and not, and not crush ourselves in the process. The weight of all of this has to come off. So what could be done differently in this blame and, shame scenario? Of course, we know, first of all, the blaming of things that have to do with interpersonal relationships and with mental, physical health. Blame is often the biggest culprit. Blame is the thing that makes us feel isolated. It makes us feel like everything's our fault. It makes us feel like we had some real control to exert over the world and we failed. Right? Shame is this double-edged sword where on one hand we feel utterly shameful that we allowed this to happen, and on the other side of shame is resentment, because we are also logical enough as creatures to resent the fact that we're being blamed for something that we have no control over. If you give your heart to somebody and they trample all over it because you're just not, cool enough to stay like unbothered while they're approaching you, not approaching you, whatever the fuck they're doing, that's not something to shame somebody for. That's not actually their fault. It's not your fault that you would like to be a genuine person if someone is interested in you. It's not your fault that if somebody in your eyes is interested in you, you feel like reciprocating without them thinking that you're being obsessive. You think they're leading you on, but you're not the one saying that. But they're allowed to blame you. In the same way, when it comes to your health, especially mental health, there may be a lot of you right now that feel utterly shamed by the people around you because they just don't understand what you're going through. And instead of finding a solution, a way forward, an emotional bridge to the now, instead it becomes this like, well, this is your fault. This is the type of shit you always do. You're always doing stupid shit like this. This is what happens when you X, Y, and Z. Which is why I brought up the philosophical and religious element. Because if we believe that our lives are written, if we believe that our destinies are written, then there are certain challenges certain questions that we have to ask, that we are here to ask. And if you're able to see any pain or confusion that you're going through right now as an invitation to learn some deep lessons and ask some very real questions, I think you get the most out of March. Because otherwise you get stuck in the mud and it feels so fucking bad because all you want to do is run from this. But when you get out of the mud, you just pick a direction and run. It's never pleasant. It's not for you. It's not for you. It just ends up being a way to run away. Right? And we don't want to run right now from our lives. We want instead to clean out our minds so we don't have to run. We want instead to stand our ground and turn around and use our horns, because enough with making me run around. Enough, like I know myself well enough to stop playing this game with myself where I just allow myself to believe in the most egotistical way possible that everything that's happened to me is because of me and it's my fault or my doing and it's nothing bigger than that. Sure, when one is stressed, when one is not getting what they want, it is easy to be that reductive. I'll give you that. but you're too smart for that. And you're also too stubborn to be treated badly, even if it's by yourself. Okay, so that's the other element of this, that there is a lot that is weighing on you. And there's two ways that you can go with that. You can decide to stop a very obviously toxic pattern and embrace yourself. You can decide to stop kicking yourself. You can decide to stop overthinking the situation and lead with love. And you can also decide that this is not your fate and not a pattern that you have to adhere to now that it's conscious. You can create any new pattern you want. You could create a pattern right now that anything that happens to you physically, mentally, is not something that comes under blame and shame. Those are circumstances that are meant to be handled and nothing else. However, since ancient times, there has been this kind of taboo when it comes to health, especially, as if health and karma are linked, as if health is a reflection of the Creator's grace and happiness with you. We make this very dangerous connection between blessings and judgment and health. So if your health is not doing well, you're not blessed. It's a judgment against you. It's so ingrained in us, especially us, those of us who have a Judeo-Christian background. Of course, it drives you crazy, but no longer. Whatever you face now is a way out of that particular mindset. It's a way to freedom. Because we know that when you're psychologically trapped in that feeling of responsibility, this is, I did this, I've got to do this, I have to fix this. Man, things spiral so bad for you because, God forbid, everything doesn't happen perfectly the way you need it to happen. The amount of abuse that comes after that, right? Now, there are also, let's talk more about finances. There are also some very strong financial elements to the month. You will be happy, inshallah, with the amount of money flowing towards you. Try to keep yourself as balanced emotionally as possible when you have these huge waves. Try to keep yourself fairly level, but it is very exciting. Like I said, it does require that your instincts be sharp. It does require you to take some quick risks, which is not your natural state. But you are in an effort to move away from the brooding, so it might be the perfect time. Ace of Pentacles and the Ace of Cups, this is not a small thing. What this means is the general tide of the world towards you has changed. You are being welcomed. A new version of you is being asked for. You are supported in ways starting in March and lasting for a good 20 years that you have not been supported, in ways that you have not felt supported, perhaps ever. The next 20 years sees you, inshallah, become so financially stable and independent that everything else in life becomes easier to deal with. Of course, being disappointed romantically is fucking terrible, but it's a lot easier to deal with sitting in your house with your bills paid and not having to look to anybody else. Of course, when we have health and wellness issues or mental health, cracks in our mental health, let's say, with everything that's going on in the world, it's not a far cry to assume that those of the zodiac that are the most sensitive, this includes you, hypersensitive actually, that you would be experiencing some deep mental health trouble right now just from watching the amount of death and destruction. This is okay. This is normal. But there is no more persecution around it. That phase of your life where anything happens and you're the first person that's close enough that people can blame, that part of your life is over. It reminds me of that difference between English and Spanish, where in English you broke the cup and in Spanish the cup broke. Right? The cup broke and the amount of Arabic that you find in Spanish is phenomenal, right? Of course, and this is from the Moors having control of Spain for so long. The cup broke implies a philosophical difference. Okay? The cup broke is cups break. What's implied is, the universe decided that it was time for that cup to break. It was the fate of that cup to break. You broke the cup. Is so much responsibility and blame placed on someone that, according to the Spanish version of that same phrase, is something that wasn't up to you. That cup was gonna break. Whether you did it, the sink did it, the floor did it, circumstance did it, timing did it, that loud noise did it, whatever it was, the cup was supposed to break. So, part of what happens with this 0 degrees Aquarius Pluto is that this door is such an astringent door to walk through. It strips so much of you away as you walk through it that the parts that get stuck, the parts that, you're finding yourself trying to pull yourself through this door and it's just gumming everything up. Those parts of you that are finding it so hard to transition into this new world, those parts of you have to do with places where you 100% believe you broke the cup. And your mentality and your bullheadedness is legendary. And that stubbornness, which I don't think sometimes that we acknowledge enough, that bullheadedness hurts you more than it hurts anybody else. Because once you get it in your head that you did something wrong or that something is your fault, your responsibility, the way that you will beat yourself up for that thing is unnatural. Because you have such a strong conviction when it comes to right and wrong. And usually that's wonderful for other people. Even when they hate it, they love it, they need that moral compass. But for you, when you do it to yourself, oh my gosh, there's none of that nicety. There's none of that like making any sort of compensatory, there are no compensatory thoughts like, oh, well, maybe it was because of this. But no. When it's you, you're the villain, you're the culprit, everything is your fault. So try to take your cues for like a very pleasant, accepting view of yourself. Try to take that energy from your financial life and the success you see there, and try your hardest to apply it to your emotional life and your health. Okay, we're going to keep shuffling and we're going to talk more about love now, but I'm going to drink some water and have a cough drop and then I'm going to come back. I love you. I'll see you in the extended.